How to save Afghanistan. When I first started making this video, US troops just pulled out of Afghanistan. And it's been about a month, and the Taliban have already taken over. With central authority being considered a joke in Afghanistan, warlords are taking charge. It looks like Afghanistan is once again on the brink of collapse and chaos. Why is this the case? And is there a way Afghanistan can be a stable, prosperous country? December 24, 1979 was the last time Afghanistan had any order, stability, peace. Since then, for a period of 42 years, which continues till today, this country and its citizens haven't known a year without poverty, instability, militias, and conflict. In this video, we are going to be examining Afghanistan and put forward a plan for stability and peaceful transfer of power in an area of the world that's known very little of it. Calling any one reason for Afghanistan's instability is foolish. Furthermore, saying that Afghanistan is inherently impoverished and unstable is wrong. The region was an important stoppage point for caravans coming and leaving India, carrying goods to Central Asia, China and beyond. The city of Kabul was established to serve the Silk Road. It has stood since Achaemenid times. Ever since then, Kabul and Afghanistan has hosted nomad armies wanting to exploit the riches of India. Kabul and its importance deteriorated because of land transport becoming expensive, and Central Asia was not required for the Silk Road anymore. But even still, Afghanistan and its people carried goods in to India using one of the oldest roads in the world, the Grand Trunk Road. This road kept Afghans coming into India until the partition. Long-term trends. In the Islamic societies, loyalties are V-shaped. That means tribal loyalties are very strong, with transnational loyalties being equally strong, and national loyalties being very weak, and total Islamic loyalties being the strongest. Wahhabism is a new trend in Islamic societies. It comes from a philosophical school that is no older than the United States are, and it basically takes parts that even the Prophet Muhammad would find extreme. It is unique and extreme, both being a very new phenomena and crazy conservative by every measure. Islam views itself as an updated, better version of Christianity. So it was deeply humiliating that for various complex reasons that political Islam was defeated and Christianity was able to win. Christianity is a social force while Islam being a social and political force. The Islamic caliphates were able to pull from structures suggested in the Quran and Hadith to build empires with the end goal of uniting the House of Islam under one monarch who had political and religious power with legitimacy given by Islamic doctrines. Basically, in short, the Islamic world is united transnationally by Islam, largely by tribal identities, with the majority tribe being Arab, usually controlled by warrior group from the mountains who are skilled in horse warfare. It was idiotic that America set up democracy in Iraq. For democracy to work, you need public trust that the government is legitimate and that ruling party will step down to ensure peaceful transfers of power. Both these things were absent in Iraq. If I were in charge, I would have set up a constitutional monarchy. Monarchies have the best track record in the Middle East and, with the exception of the Saudis, are fairly tolerant and reasonable places to live in. This is because the monarch acts as a neutral, impartial force that is seen as a uniform representative of the tribe. What is good for one isn't what's good for others. If Afghanistan is to have any stability, it needs to have a monarch. Factors of instability. The border. The border of Afghanistan is artificially created. This is the Pashtun tribal territory, and this is the Afghani border. The Pashtuns are split between the two countries, and border patrol being a joke in the mountains, this border is unenforceable. The Pakistani government has recently built a fence along the border, but it's not going to work. The border has been largely ignored by Pashtuns who cross it regularly to see their friends and families, who are on the other side. Even with the border, there are guides and smugglers who are ready to take people to the other side. In short, the borders do not work. and need to change, and it has been true since the border was created by Sir Mortimer Durrant and the signatories who all agreed to delineate the border. This border was never accepted by the Pashtun-run Afghan government, and it has always been a problem for the two countries. In fact, when Pakistan was first admitted to the United Nations, there was only one country who voted against Pakistan joining the UN, Afghanistan, because of the border. Pakistan and ISI. Pakistan knows that the border is porous and that the Pashtuns are not happy living in a Punjabi-run state. Pakistan. A stable Afghanistan will always mean trouble, so Pakistan does everything it can to destabilize Afghanistan. The Muslim world has generally ignored the West's superiority until the Europeans colonized them, making ignoring the West impossible. After the colonizers left, the region began to be ruled by right-wing Western-oriented militaristic thugs who didn't improve anything but left the Muslim world feeling angry at the West. This anger combined with Wahhabism and the population growth with sluggish economic growth produced a desperate young male population who were willing to fight the enemy, who they see as the West, and any Western allied state interfering in the region. This desperate and dispossessed population, who oftentimes were young children who fled their homes as refugees, were used by states and non-state actors who gave them a purpose, community, and enemy to fight against. The biggest employers of these terrorists was and still is Pakistan. In the 1970s, many Islamic fanatical movements rose up because of reasons mentioned above, and they were put down very effectively by the Western-oriented militaristic thugs we just talked about. And the remaining who survived all fled the countries to, on the Shia side, Iran, and on the Sunni side, Saudi Arabia. But there was one country who was struggling to put down the rebellion. As things got desperate, a communist faction took control of Afghanistan. Supported by the Soviet Union, the country became a communist country, and state-sponsored atheism was enacted. This made the Islamists very mad, and they continued their attack. Seeing the communist Afghan government could not fight the war alone, they called for help, and the Soviet army got involved in the conflict. This is how the Soviet-Afghan war started, causing hundreds of thousands of people to die and millions to become refugees. They fled as children to Pakistan, a country who was keen to use them as non-state militias. The refugees studied in Pakistani madrasas, were indoctrinated by Wahhabist clerics, and returned to their country to kick out the West. This is exactly how the Taliban started. The word Taliban itself literally means student in Arabic, and every single Islamist terrorist group was and still is started like this. But here is the thing about terrorism. It's a boomerang. It always comes back. Today, more Pakistanis die of terrorism than any other country. The reason why there are so many terror outfits in Pakistan is because the ISI created them, taught them, funded them, and gave them weapons. Today, Pakistan has created a monster that even they can't control. The reason why Pakistan still funds terrorism, even though it has been blacklisted and is broke, is because they have no other alternative. The lower ranking ISI officers are themselves sympathetic to the Taliban cause, because lower ranking ISI officers are also members of the Taliban. Plus, they don't want to shoot their friends. If the Pakistani government stops funding terrorism, a large faction of their army will rebel and might take power. In short, the country will fall apart, and without the army, the state of Pakistan will fracture. Remember, most countries got an army, but Pakistan, the army's got a state.
It is a state, to paraphrase Voltaire on Prussia. In India, we have an army. We have a state that has an army. In Pakistan, we have an army that has a state. So,
peace is possible by nomad standards. Here is the thing, peace by farming people standard is impossible in Afghanistan. Enforcing order isn't impossible. But peace can't be enforced by force. The people are good fighters, and 40 years of war and conflict have made them tougher. Unless you have a military genius, the likes of Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, or Cyrus the Great, no way you're conquering Afghanistan. I think the best template for peace in Afghanistan is to follow the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was very similar to Afghanistan today. The empire was an anarchical mess with Emperor barely having any control outside of his province and the Lord and Dukes of Germany constantly being with the empire. If you take a look at structurally, the two don't seem very different. The main weakness of the empire, which is reflected in Afghanistan, is the internal conflict between the papacy and the knights, resulting in an inability to coordinate in our timeline. This conflict between the Pope and the Emperor for power and leadership is called the investiture controversy. The following result of this struggle was the Catholic Church was able to increase its power and the Holy Roman Empire became a weaker and more decentralized entity. This is the most realistic plan towards peace in Afghanistan. First, you need to have a monarch. Here is the reasons why. Who is going to be the monarch? I think it's best to continue the lineage of Muhammad Zahir Shah, who was the last king of Afghanistan before everything went to hell in a handbasket. Under him, Afghanistan was a stable westernizing state. Here are some pictures from that time. The monarchy was abolished in a coup after which the army took power. Ever since then, Afghanistan has degenerated. After the establishment of the monarchy, the king needs to pacify the warlords. The monarch will be more successful in this than republican positions, presidents, prime ministers, etc. Because of these reasons. This will basically revert everything back to how it was in the 1970s. Afghanistan will occupy the same position as the Holy Roman Empire. If the empire had won against the Pope, the next step is to move on to a Poland-Lithuanian Commonwealth level. Poland was once the most developed, powerful countries in Europe. However, it collapsed and fell while Western Europe was able to rise. This is because while Poland was a democratic capitalist state with excellence in many fields, while Western Europe was a backwater, Poland's biggest weakness and the reason it collapsed into obscurity was the wealthy class, the Szlachta, who were 7% of the Polish population, contributed everything to the country. The lack of division of power politically, economically and culturally means a collapse of the strength of the nation. If we follow this plan, the same thing will happen to Afghanistan, with the Barazai, who are in the millions, filling most to all of the productive contributing positions of the country. Afghanistan in the same position of Poland-Lithuania Commonwealth. But the concentration of power is an easier problem to solve than absolute anarchy. Conclusion. The following would take Afghanistan from a war-reverted terrorist hotspot to a constitutional monarch something to a stable, centralized, capitalist, democratic, fairly tolerant, definitely more prosperous, respectable nation.